Right, so on Thursday the 3rd of November, the High Court has ruled that it has to be Parliament and not the Executive, Theresa May, who's going to trigger Article 50. And the media has been going a little cray-cray.
A little crazy.
Right, so let's have a look at some headlines here. What have you got for us there?
Okay, so The Sun, we've got the wonderful headline, "Who do you think you are? Loaded foreign elite defy will of Brit voters," despite the fact that the owner of The Sun, as we all know, is Australian and quite clearly a billionaire.
Loaded.
The Daily Express, we've got "We must get out of the EU," and the Daily Mail, "Enemies of the people," declaring the judges enemy of the people.
Right, and I think that's the one that's been getting people the most concerned, I think. There's definitely a kind of, oh my god, this is a mob mentality, and it does kind of remind me of the French Revolution a little bit. I can kind of imagine these people storming into Parliament. Right, so yes, May's been getting quite a lot of shit for this, hasn't she?
She's come under a lot of pressure of late.
For not wading in. I'm not sure I blame her for not wading into the.
I mean, what can she do really?
Right.
In this position.
I think don't get drawn into that kind of mudslinging. But I think yes, the funniest response out of all of this, I think, has to be, "We want UK judges deciding on UK legal matters." UK judges decide on UK legal matters.
Enemies of the people.
Enemies of the people. Right, but it's easy to take the piss out of the right-wing,
as always,
press, right? But actually, I want to read a little something from Polly Toynbee of the Guardian to kind of illustrate that there can be hypocrisy on both sides and absurdity. So, quote: "A prime minister's absolute power to do what they like, when they like, regardless of laws and treaties, was struck down. Theresa May cannot tear up our right to be EU citizens without the authority of Parliament. Those rights were bestowed by parliamentary votes in a series of treaties. She can't high-handedly abandon them and trigger our exit from the EU without Parliament's agreement."
Nice pronunciation.
Parliament.
I think the language there is I don't know, for me that was what's interesting. The use of, by saying, so Theresa May cannot tear up our right to be EU citizens without the authority of Parliament. It's neglecting the fact that we had a referendum. I'm not sure if Polly remembers this. Full disclosure, we both voted Remain, but referendums, I mean, democracy is democracy. People voted to leave. I mean, that's where the decision comes from.
I mean, you would expect that this was being written in an alternative world where we voted Remain and Theresa May just decided to do what she likes.
Yeah.
This is obviously absurdly grandiose. And she goes on. "There are times when MPs need to rise above their party interests, their own interests, and the views of their constituents. That may risk being voted out, but they may earn more respect by standing up for the national interest as best they can determine. That's what representative democracy is for. This will test the mettle not just of individual MPs, but of the nature and purpose of a representative democratic system. A non-binding referendum voted on amid a thicket of utterly cynical lies and promises cannot be a tombstone block to the judgment of MPs on this vital matter of national interest." God, this goes on. "It's not anti-democratic to try to stop what so many other countries see as an incomprehensible act of economic suicide." I mean, let's just finish on that one. What a bizarre finish. It's not anti-democratic to try and stop what other people from outside the country think is mad.
That's how democracy works, I'm sure.
Yeah, so she thinks that MPs, well, maybe you can phrase this nicely for me, what the crux of this is.
I mean, well, what's interesting about it, I think, is the fact that it's as partisan as the right-wing media that it claims to also be criticising. It's basically finding a way to explain away the referendum result, to explain away what the referendum has judged to be the decision of the people. And basically saying that MPs should be making their own minds up at this point now, and neglecting the fact that the majority of people, even though it's a slim majority, voted to leave the EU.
Right. I do not think that she would be making this argument were the opposite to be the case. It's just quite simple, motivated reasoning, trying to back up her position, but just a little bit, well, I'd say, a little bit more subtle than enemies of the people, but just as much hypocritical, I think.
Okay, so moving on, I think what's interesting about this combination of these reactions from the media is it kind of brings into debate what democracy is, what parliamentary democracy actually means. Are we, as constituents, are you giving MPs the power to do what they think is right? Is that what democracy is? Is Theresa May being voted in order to
use her judgment
to enact certain decisions and to make her adjudged decisions on what should happen? Or is the way that democracy should work that the MP is taking forth the majority opinions and beliefs of their constituents and debating that in Parliament, using parliamentary power to do that?
At this point, I would like to insert a caveat, which is that this argument makes more sense when you're talking about a Prime Minister who was actually voted in,
True.
rather than one who just, undemocratic, not through the usual democratic process, became the leader like the American election. But either way. So I think one particular problem with her argument, Polly Toynbee's argument, is she's gone fully to one side. Yeah. There was a referendum, but it's not anti-democratic for the representatives of the people because it was non-binding. Because it was non-binding.
It was non-binding.
Yeah, I'm sure it would have been pretty binding if they won. But she's saying the opposite. I mean, that's a massive case for we should be leaving it to the judgment of the MPs. But this just seems so elitist. I mean, even to us two Remainers, I can't get behind that at all.
So I think it's worth talking about then, move on to what it actually represents. So one possibility is, what do we do now? Well, one thing we need to think about, next month the Supreme Court's going to decide on, we think that at the moment Theresa May is going to be appealing the decision, and that's going to be heard by the Supreme Court next month if all goes according to plan. And so I guess we need to talk about what would be the ideal outcome of this. What do you think? As in, how do you think?
Okay, alright, so I think there's a distinction that needs to be made here about this decision, good or bad, right? Here's what good or bad the decision, here's what it shouldn't mean. It shouldn't be used as an opportunity to stick it to the Brexiters, to delay the triggering of Article 50, and it shouldn't be considered a route to the second referendum either. I think those are all things that it shouldn't be. And by God, Sean, who would think it's a good idea, Owen Smith, to have a second referendum? I mean, just that in itself, but there's been suggestions of a referendum on Brexit terms. Can you imagine that going well? A nice reasoned decision?
So personally, I would say, for me, a good path to be, and this is, I do believe that a democracy should be at the heart of everything, that constituents' opinions, people's opinions should be heard at all costs. And so that means that I think, I'll explain why this is in a minute, I think within constituencies there should be debate and the MP should carry forth their opinion. You could argue that that's already happened through the referendum, but actually the borders that was voted, the borders that made up the people that contain the people who voted for Brexit or against Brexit, they're different to the borders that they don't represent the constituencies exactly. So it's slightly different. But ultimately, this is going to happen. We know that MPs are going to debate this in Parliament if the Supreme Court holds a decision of the three judges. So if that happens, there's going to be debate in public. That gives us an opportunity to actually discuss this in our constituencies, with the rest of our communities, with our MPs, and for them to represent the general views of those people. Of course, if you live in Peterborough, for example, you're going to be going forward with some strong anti-EU arguments and vice versa.
Yeah, and I think here you touch on kind of the two sides of this argument. One, I mean, that's amazing that we can bring in all this democratic debate, and we can also bring in all this expertise as well. So, I mean, one thing that we can draw on the House of Commons, House of Lords, is all these ideas that can contribute to what makes a good, Brexit, what's fair, what works for different sectors of society. and that's what we want, right? If you compare that to a small team essentially doing it, then there's not much expertise there. But then at the same time, with so many people wanting different ways that benefit for them, I mean, how long could this go on for? Is there a benefit to having a strong leader, like a presidential figure like May and her team, who are stopping this just going on for years?
That should definitely not happen. If there's, okay, hypothetically, there'll be a date set for a parliamentary debate, and before that time, all's fair game. And of course, the media are going to go to war again, as they did. But I guess one interesting thing is that having a debate in Parliament kind of insulates the media's influence on people. That it's taking place within the Houses of Parliament. But I also think it would be nice to get people involved in politics again, to fight this, not down the pub, not on social media fighting on Facebook, but to be in with real people and your MPs in your constituency, getting involved and actually knowing that your voice is being heard. That for me is what it's all about. If we leave the EU on those terms, I would accept it in a heartbeat. Not really, but but at least democracy's been done. I wouldn't be happy about it, but that's democracy.
Right. And at this stage, for people who are disappointed with the exit vote, the least you can hope for, right, is at least some a debate on how conductive,
right,
with some kind of decorum, with all sides being heard.
Right.